And with us here in studio is our political correspondent, Charlotte Potts, who's also been following these negotiations for us. Charlotte, we heard from Manfred Weber there saying what the reactions are in Europe. And of course, a lot of people have really been looking closely to see what this agreement says and what it means for how the next German government will move forward. And it's precisely those ministry posts that are very important in indicating what we can expect. What do you make of how these ministries have been divvied up?
Yeah, exactly. And the Social Democrats, they came out as a clear winner there in the talks. They've scored 3 ministries that are extremely important, not only nationally, but also globally. And that is, for one, the Foreign Ministry, which the former president of the European Parliament, Martin Schulz, is maybe taking over, as we are hearing. But also the Finance Ministry, which Olaf Scholz will be taking over, the mayor of Hamburg. That is extremely important because Germany has led a strong austerity course for Southern Europe for the recovery. And Europeans have been looking very closely towards who will take over the finance ministry and if there might be a change of course and further investment and further integration for Europe. And it looks like the chances are higher now with the Social Democrats leading that finance ministry. And the third very important post, of course, for the Social Democrats, who are traditionally a party for the unions, of the unions, is the Labour Ministry. And they will be leading that as well. So 3 very, very important ministry post for the Social Democrats.
And with Martin Schulz taking over, possibly, as reports say, the foreign ministry post, as you said, there is strong speculation that he would give up his post as the head of the party and that would be moved then to Andrea Nahles. She, until now, has been the head of the Social Democrats in Parliament. She would take over the party chairmanship. Let's take a look at more about Andrea Nahles now in this report.
It was during the preliminary talks that Andrea Nahles lost her voice. But that didn't stop her from giving the would-be coalition partners from the Conservative parties a good telling off after information about the negotiations had been leaked.
It was very annoying that some results have been made public by someone.
Andrea Nahles is the leader of the SPD MPs in the Bundestag, and she has a reputation for being outspoken. Some say it was her speech at the Social Democrats Party conference that secured the votes needed for starting coalition talks with Angela Merkel's Conservative bloc.
We're going to negotiate and get some more good results. That's why voting yes today is worth it.
In recent weeks, 2 other SPD women also came into the focus of the German public. First, Malu Dreyer. Although handicapped by multiple sclerosis, she's deputy party leader and state premier of Rhineland-Palatinate. And Manuela Schwesig, also deputy leader and state premier from Mecklenburg-Western Pomerania. All 3 women have had very different careers within the SPD. Andrea Nahles started off more than 20 years ago within the SPD youth organization Young Socialists. She became their leader in 1995. Back then she was a student of political science and told Deutsche Welle in one of her first interviews that she didn't plan a political career.
I don't want to stay in politics for the rest of my life, so after being chair, I want to look for a real job, and for that, I need a good degree.
Nahles finished her studies 4 years later and has stayed within the ranks of the SPD ever since, as MP, party official, and later as Labour Minister. One of her achievements is Germany's new minimum wage law. She's very popular among the party membership, but not with the German public. Quite the opposite is true of Manuela Schwesig. Her party career started considerably late. The trained revenue commissioner joined the party in 2003 and has risen through the ranks very quickly. In 2013, she became Federal Minister for Family Affairs and pushed through several gender equality laws. Malu Dreyer is the last SPD politician who managed to win an important election. That was in 2016. Many see her as having high potential within the SPD. She first opposed the Grand Coalition, but at the party conference she called for a renewal of the party within government.
This renewal is up to us. It can only come from within.
Martin Schulz still is the leader of the Social Democrats, but without the strong women behind him, there wouldn't be much left to lead.
So, Sumi, we're seeing here Andrea Nahles. She is taking over probably the party leadership of the Social Democrats, and that is extremely important because she basically single-handedly at the party conference saved this grand coalition deal and convinced the party delegates to go into these coalition talks with the Conservatives. Martin Schulz really has lost, he had the worst year in German politics last year. He has lost credibility with his party. And so it is a very smart move that he might be stepping down as party leader, giving it over to Andrea Nahles and taking the foreign policy post in the foreign ministry. A very smart move of the Social Democrats there.
And the reason that's important, Charlotte, we have to remind our viewers is that even though there's been this breakthrough today that the two negotiating parties have reached an agreement on forming a coalition government, the SPD party members will have to vote on this before it can move forward. That's in about 3 weeks' time, we're expecting. What can we expect from that vote?
Right. We haven't quite seen the end of it yet, so we don't have a new German government just yet. We should not get ahead of ourselves. We're talking about nearly 500,000 SPD members voting on this coalition agreement. So basically what's going to happen is they are going to send out that coalition agreement to the membership, and they will have about 3 weeks, as you mentioned, to vote on that. And if the majority of the SPD party membership votes yes, then finally this new government can be formed. So it could be around Easter, or it could take until Easter until we see that new German government. And it's just the tricky part because we don't know how the SPD membership is going to vote. But we also have to say the results of the coalition talks are so good for the Social Democrats that the membership is likely to vote yes, we are going to go into that new government.
All right, Charlotte, I want to remind our viewers here in the bottom of the screen, we are looking at pictures of the CDU party headquarters here in Berlin. We are waiting for statements from the party leaders to announce officially this new coalition agreement. We're waiting for that in about 12 minutes' time. We'll be listening to that live. But in the meantime, Charlotte, looking at this entire protracted process, as we've said, how have German politics changed over these past 4 months as we've seen various parties trying to form coalition governments?
Well, extremely. I mean, we've seen them really struggling to get a government in place. First of all, we saw Angela Merkel trying to get a coalition agreement with the Greens and the business-friendly liberals, and that didn't work out. Everybody was quite shocked about that because people really counted on them forming the new government. And then the German president had to step in and remind the Social Democrats as well as the Conservatives of their responsibility to at least try to form a new government before they would call new elections. And so they went into these discussions, and in the end, we are now seeing a coalition deal, and they've tried really hard. Both sides had to make concessions because the alternatives would have been worse. Nobody wanted fresh elections. There was no money for fresh elections within the parties for the campaigns, but also the results of fresh elections would be so unclear. It might have actually strengthened the fringes, the right-wing populist AfD party, for example. So everybody wanted to avoid that, and that's what we are seeing right now, that in these coalition talks, quite a few concessions were made.
Do you think voters will be satisfied?
I think that some voters will be satisfied, of course, yeah. Overall, we have to say that the grand new vision for what Germany should look like in the next 4 years, that is lacking in that coalition agreement.
All right, our political correspondent, Charlotte Potts, with us here in studio. We are, again, waiting for that statement to come in about now 10 minutes. We'll be coming back to speak to you in a little bit time, Charlotte, but thank you, first of all, for your analysis. And as we're waiting for those statements, we're going to move on now to some other international news, rather. In Taiwan, rescue efforts are underway after a 6.4 magnitude earthquake killed at least 6 people and injured hundreds of others. Authorities say around 60 people are still unaccounted for. It is the second major quake to hit the island nation in recent days, with more aftershocks feared. DW's political correspondent Charlotte Potts is with us here in studio, who's also been following these coalition negotiations for us. As we heard there, that is another big hurdle, and that's why the Social Democrats have been fighting so hard to come out of these coalition negotiations with a good deal to take to the party members. And as we've heard, the SPD has managed to take some good ministry posts, some top ministry posts. Tell us how significant that is.
It's really an excellent result for the Social Democrats. I mean, with Martin Schulz leading probably the foreign ministry, that is a very important post, which was in SPD hands before, we have to say. But he will be, of course, a strong European supporter. So that is a huge deal for the SPD. And then the other ministry that came as quite a surprise is the finance ministry, which was before in Christian Democratic hands and has been a key post for Christian Democrats for a long time. So it's going to be very interesting to see. It's probably going to be led by the mayor of Hamburg, Olaf Scholz, and it's going to be very interesting to see what that means also for the European Union. Germany has led this very strong austerity course within the European Union for the past years, and that could now change under the leadership of Olaf Scholz, under the leadership of the Social Democrats. And then third, they are going to get the Labour Ministry, which is also, of course, a key post for the Social Democrats. So they are really the winners of these coalition talks.
And who are the losers here? I mean, how does Chancellor Merkel come out of this?
Well, I mean, she has not gotten the big ministries, that's for sure. At the moment, we are hearing that she will have the defense and the economic ministry, her party. But really, the key issues that she has been wanting to push through, we'll have to see if those are in the coalition agreement. It seems like she is down as chancellor, but not quite out. I mean, she is going to be the chancellor leading this grand coalition for the next 4 years. So she has gotten that, but the vision that the CDU has wanted for this grand coalition, we can't really tell if that's in there at the moment.
What about the other parties in Germany's political landscape? Most specifically here, the far-right Alternative for Germany, the AfD, that entered parliament for the first time now in September. How have they been observing this process, and have they benefited from it?
Yeah, they've most certainly benefited from it. I mean, we're talking about the two main parties going into another grand coalition for another 4 years. And that has already, in the past 4 years, certainly supported the fringes or made the fringes grow. The right-wing populists, they entered the parliament in September for the first time, and they've been really soaring the debate towards the right here. And you can see that in this coalition agreement as well, in terms of refugees. The compromises they've been agreeing upon are more to the right than what we would have seen maybe a year ago when the AfD was not in parliament. So it really reflects upon the political situation here, and the AfD will come out as another winner in this because in the long term a grand coalition could really strengthen the fringes even more.
How important is this coalition breakthrough in terms of sending a signal of stability to Europe, as you mentioned, also the rest of the world?
I think it's extremely important. I mean, it's been over 4 months since the election. And here in Germany, the voters were quite patient, actually, in terms of with the acting government and in terms of holding off and waiting through a couple of coalition and exploratory talks also with other parties. But on a global scale, I think the world has been waiting for Germany to get its act together and to have a stable government, to see Chancellor Merkel once more leading a stable government. And in terms of Europe, as we mentioned, Emmanuel Macron has been pushing for reforms in the European Union to further integration, and he's been eagerly waiting for Germany to be by his side, to be a strong partner in those reforms again.
And what about German voters, Charlotte? How have they been observing this entire process?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been talking to quite a few voters over the past month, and they could have been more impatient. I was surprised how patient they were. They've been saying, look, we have an acting government in place. Germany is doing well as a country, as a whole. At the moment, the economy is doing well. So we are not quite feeling the consequences of not having a stable government in place at the moment. So all in all, overall, they've been quite patient with the politicians. They've been seeing that the politicians have been working throughout the nights and have been really trying to find a responsible way, trying to build a government. But I felt like now in the beginning of the new year, after having waited already so many months, now Germans were very eager to see a deal come through.
If you look at the latest opinion polls, though, the two largest political groups in Germany, according to these opinion polls, no longer have a majority. For the first time in post-war history, does that mean that they really have in some ways lost confidence in Germany's biggest parties?
Yeah, I think it's a trend that we're seeing all over Europe, that the political middle, so to say, is losing support more and more, and that the fringes are growing. That's been happening in Germany. So we are seeing more parties than ever in parliament that will have to lead the legislative agenda now and debate that. And I think it's a trend that's been growing in Germany, of course, with having a grand coalition in place for the past 4 years, with a grand coalition that could have had a stronger vision. You know, the devil lies in the details. Also in these coalition talks, they've been discussing issues like family reunifications for refugees, but in a very detailed way. And the bigger issue of how do we integrate those people that came in 2015 during the refugee crisis, the almost 1 million people, into German society, those issues were not thoroughly discussed. And I think that's a feeling that German voters also have, that this grand coalition is lacking a brave vision for Germany, and that showed in the votes, and we'll see how that goes in the next 4 years.
All right, our political correspondent Charlotte Potts with us here in studio. Thank you very much for your analysis. We'll be talking to you a little bit later. Thank you.